Welcome to On Record. வெல்கம் டு ஆன் ரெக்கார்ட். இன்றைக்கு நம்மோடு நேர்காணலுக்காக சிறப்பு விருந்தினராக செயற்பாட்டாளர் தீஸ்தா செதில்வாத் அவர்கள் இணைந்திருக்கிறார். Today we have Ms. Teesta Sedilwat to discuss about various political issues going around in the country. Ma'am, welcome to our show, ma'am.
Great pleasure. Always a pleasure talking to you, Indra.
Thank you, ma'am. 2 days back, the Supreme Court gave a judgment regarding the governor's attitude towards signing the bills. We can see every state has a governor, and everyone is acting in a patterned way that they are not signing any bills that is related to education or universities or the same kind. Yesterday, the Supreme Court had ruled that the governor has to sign the bills or he has to return the bill to the assembly. He should not, the withholding means he should send it back to the assembly, and it has also framed the time limit for the governors, because previously the governors were telling that as soon as possible means there is no time limit for us and we can act on our own. And the Supreme Court also said that you should act only on the aid and advice of the Chief Minister and Council of Ministers. How do you see that judgment?
No, it's a huge victory in the current political scenario to the kind of governors, whether it is in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Odisha, many states, Punjab, where the governors have been acting as stooges of the central government. So I think, of course, in the current political context, it's a blow to this majoritarian or autocratic regime that we see at the center, which is trying to actually kill the roots of federalism. Because, you know, I think the most important thing about this judgment, because the Supreme Court has also exercised its powers under Article 142 to make the 10 bills which were withheld in this unconstitutional manner effective as of now. So it's a very extraordinary judgment. It is also a very speaking judgment. It does not only talk about principles, but it has actually given voice to those principles, given action to those principles. And, you know, we have seen an erosion of federalism over the years, Indra. I mean, to be honest with you, even previous regimes at the center have not been very good on the federal issue. We've had many commission reports on this which have not been implemented. And it's very unfortunate that the issues like education, health, agriculture, you know, even law and order, which are squarely in the either in the state list or in the concurrent list. Some in the state have been pulled into the concurrent list, and those which are in the state list are being adjudicated upon by the center. So I think it has far-reaching consequences, and it's particularly for many of us concerned with the way this regime is going under the tutelage of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which is its parent organization. BJP is only the parliamentary wing of it. It is a very, very crucial judgment.
We have seen attack on the democratic institutions that have been functioning for a very long time since the independence. One such thing is Election Commission of India. Before 2014, no one doubted Election Commission of India. We only doubted the electoral officers whenever the booth capturing or such attempts were happened. But now the whole Election Commission is being suspected, and they are not replying properly to the memorandums that have been submitted to them. In the election time also, the India Alliance submitted a memorandum, but there was an immediate response when Kharge ji submitted the memorandum. I don't know how they got time to read some 50 or 70 pages within an half an hour and to type that rebuttal. It seems they have already typed the rebuttal and then publishing it when Kharge ji entered the office. We can see the Vote for Democracy movement have also sent a memorandum to the Election Commission of India, which holds 5 demands. So why another memorandum for which the Election Commission of India is not ever going to respond?
As citizens, what do we do? That's the whole question mark. As citizens, what do we do? And you're absolutely right when you say that post-independence, we've seen an erosion of our constitutional institutions, all of them. And the Election Commission, particularly in the last, I would say after 2017, has been the marker, because we saw the introduction of an external element in the VVPAT system, which I'll explain in a minute. But the erosion of the trust of the people in the Election Commission was reflected in a CSDS survey that was conducted in April 2024, just before the parliamentary elections, and then again before the Haryana and Jharkhand and Kashmir elections. Less than 28% of people have faith in the Election Commission, as per this nationwide survey. Now, this should worry any institution concerned about its credibility, about its trust in the people, should be really concerned that why our ordinary people, the voters, have so little faith in us. But it appears that the Election Commission under this regime is functioning with complete disregard for the citizens of this country, the preamble of this country. I think Article 324 to 326, which enjoins upon the Election Commission to conduct free and fair elections and to ensure universal adult franchise, that everybody, you, me, any caste, any creed, any gender, any language, a person who is a legitimate citizen of India needs to be able to vote. What is the Election Commission doing to ensure that every voter votes, every voter knows that the vote that he has cast or she has cast is counted, transparently cast and counted for the person and party that he or she has voted for? That is the question. And I think the story begins really with November 2023, when a speaking order, again by the Supreme Court, on the appointment of the Election Commissioner, required that along with the government and the leader of the opposition, there should also be consultation with the Chief Justice of India. And within weeks of that, the government brought in a law to countermand that decision, to upturn that decision. And then you saw a series of appointments of election commissioners who were even worse than the ones earlier. Now, I just want to raise a point that, we had the emergency. This country had an emergency, and today we use the term undeclared emergency for this regime. Even after the election that were called by Mrs. Gandhi in 77, you were not born then. I was just 15 or 16 years old. And I remember there was never a doubt cast on the fair conduct of elections, even though it was just after the emergency. And an oppressive regime was overthrown. Okay. So, imagine that election commission then and today's election commission, which all the opposition parties, various citizens groups are questioning. And this election commission does not even have the courtesy or the time or the constitutional obligation which it has in law and under the constitution to meet with people and answer the concerns and address those concerns. So I think it's very, very critical. We sat together after the Lok Sabha elections, which had brought the majority down to 240, submitted one memorandum in July, which was extremely detailed. Again, it was signed by over 55 individuals and organizations. This one is about to be submitted. It will be signed by over 80 and individuals and organizations. And our demands are very simple. We are saying that please have consistent data parameters in terms of release of voter figures. Please ensure either an efficient electronic voting system or an accountable, transparent electronic voting system. And if it is not one or the other, then you have to consider return to the paper ballot. But we'll come back to that later. The first point is, on the Election Commission website, why do you and I not have access to the voter list of every election in a searchable format? Why are they put in a format which is not searchable? So no voter can sitting in either Trichy or Puducherry or anywhere in Varda, Gadchiroli can sit and search. We're talking about digital India, right? So we should be able to just put in our name, EPIC number, and find out whether I'm on the voters list or not, and whether I was on the voters list in 1971 and 1962 and 1977. So first and foremost, one of our major demands is that if you claim that this electronic voting system is efficient and is transparent and foolproof, you can prove it to us by putting up all the voters list for the previous elections and now, including the updated ones, constituency wise and state wise, on your website in a searchable format. The underlining is a searchable format. They say we put it up, but those are not searchable. So they're not in a searchable format. So if your format is not searchable, there is something seriously wrong with it. Similarly, we are demanding that Form 17C, Form 17A, Form 9, 10, 11, A, B, C also are put up. Now, these will ensure that people and candidates can cross-verify the figures of voters, votes cast and votes counted. So these are the major issues we are raising. We are also asking whether the microprocessor in the SLU unit is actually transparent and verifiable as per the Supreme Court order. Because every time candidates are going to ask for the microprocessor verification, they are being saying we'll do a mock poll. So basically, the Election Commission appears to be violating its own laws, its own manual, its own set guidelines on many counts. On the voters list, on the conduct of elections, on the security of the EVM machine, how it is kept. The SLU unit is not kept secure. And very few of the voters know that post 2017, there was a vulnerability introduced into the electronic voting system by introduction of an external element which allowed the candidates list and the symbols to be loaded directly by internet from the Election Commission office into that EVS system. So immediately you have introduced a vulnerability. And we have experts like Madhav Deshpande, Harish Karnik, Dr. Pyarelal Garg, who are raising these questions in a very educative, scientific, technical format, and they are not being answered.
And regarding the counting of VVPAT also, there is also demand to give the VVPAT slip to the voters and then drop it to another box and then count it 100% to ensure that.
Because see, the argument that EVS is the most efficient system and time to come to give the voter slip is it's not onerous. You are eventually supposedly showing us the slip before it goes into the box, the one we see after the 7-second pressing on the button. So the same slip, before putting it into any box, you ensure it's cut, give it to our hands, let us walk up to another box and put it there. In which case, I will be satisfied that between the two units, there is no manipulation possible or going on. And the actual voter slip that I see is what is actually being counted in my name. Yes, that is also a demand.
But the same issue also put up in front of the Supreme Court when they were hearing the EVM manipulation was happening or not, but they strictly refused to do that, and the Election Commission also said that it is very much time consuming and we cannot do that, and the court also seems agreed to that. So how do you think they are taking this?
This is a grey area, and this is a tricky area which also citizens will have to navigate. And we are trying to figure out how to do it. Because we have a lot of faith in the higher judiciary. We have a lot of faith in the Supreme Court. But we also know that sometimes the Supreme Court gets overwhelmed with kind of technological know-how that is thrown at them by the Election Commission. And often this is misguided. And I say this with some responsibility because in the past also, in the last post-2017 period, because we've had judgments like the Subramaniam Swamy judgment, the Chandrababu Naidu judgment, which were actually quite good. And then suddenly you find the Supreme Court going back on its own verdicts on the VVPAT system, where earlier they said 25% of VVPATs are verifiable. Now they seem to have come down to much less. So I think the question that we need to be able to ask the Supreme Court at some point, I hope it's sooner than later, is that, on this technological issue, we seem to be blindsided by a view being put forward by the Election Commission that our system is fine and all these people are nerds who are trying to question a technologically savvy system. So we are saying now in this memorandum, which will go out in the next day or two, that, okay, we believe your system is not savvy, it's messy. It's a messy system. And why are we saying that? Because if it was a savvy system, if it was a technologically foolproof system, you would be able to give us, like I said in our demand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that the voters list in a searchable format. I'm repeating this because if you remember after the Maharashtra elections and after the Delhi elections, the major allegations of political party opposition was that between May-June 2024 and November 2024 in Maharashtra, 41 lakh votes increased, which is way above the average of the previous years. I mean, I have the figures of the previous years in Maharashtra from 2019 onwards, and never has been the increase been so sharp. And therefore, the opposition was demanding that you give us the voters list. You give us the voters list through which you allowed so many more people to vote. You give us the voters list through which people voted in the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha, and we will verify. And then we'll come back to you with a more informed complaint. But if and that's Form 9, 10, 11A, B, C that I mentioned. It is Form 9, 10, 11A that we are also demanding along with 17C that tells us who has gone to the Election Commission to delete my vote. Now, there's also a problem in the rules that have been brought in by the Election Commission that allows a third party to ensure deletion of somebody's vote. Now, that is inherently problematic and is brought in not through the law but through rules, which also needs to be struck down. And somehow or the other, the Supreme Court has to be dialogued with to explain that this kind of provision is basically denying my fundamental right to vote. So it's going to be some sort of navigation. We'll have to navigate it carefully. We'll have to be able to soberly convince the Supreme Court that, listen, please go back to your own judgments earlier. Figure out why we are saying this. We are not saying it because we are, many of us have been working on other issues, but we started working on these issues because we feel this is critical to democracy itself. And if a section of voters is either being denied the right to vote, and then you find particularly Dalits, minorities, Adivasis, Muslims, Christians vanishing from the voters list in set constituencies. I'm making generalizations, but these generalizations are based on certain examples. Then I think the Election Commission needs to win back the confidence of the people.
But whenever this issue comes up, the BJP or the ruling party faction says that these are losers' issues. People are not worried about this. Only the losers are worried about this. And the civil society organizations are being funded by these international mafia and the Indian mafia, which have nexus to promote Rahul Gandhi. These are the allegations made by the ruling party members.
See, I'm just mentioning that in 2010, 11, 12, 13 period, Mr. Subramaniam Swamy, many BJP members, there was a BJP member from former undivided Andhra Pradesh, who raised this question, even published a book on it. I'm forgetting his name at the moment. And I think, I don't want to get into this political mudslinging just now. I'm even willing to accept that there are some people in the BJP, though I believe they're completely silent just now, who care about the democratic functioning of this country. Okay, who care about whether everybody is allowed to vote or not. There are very few of them. They are unfortunately completely fear-struck by this leadership, and therefore they are quiet. But I do believe some of them do exist. Okay, so I don't want to get into this BJP Congress binary. Okay, why? Because part of our complaint also is, as citizens or people's groups or people's organizations, civil society, is that the opposition is not fighting this as rigorously as it should. That has been our complaint with the opposition as well. I mean, we are very happy that an esteemed leader like Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge raised it with the Election Commission, the example that you mentioned. We deeply respect him, but we believe it has to be more consistent. You have to have a consistent, actually a andolan or a sangharsh on the streets, because this is not simply about submitting a memorandum and asking for time. If you're not able to mobilize people, and there are people waiting to be mobilized, because we know that people are disenchanted with the way the Election Commission is functioning. But it is the outreach of the political opposition that seems to be wanting. I remember the words of Mr. Akhilesh Yadav soon after the Lok Sabha election, that even if I win all 80 seats in Uttar Pradesh, I will still question the system of electronic voting system. And unless that spirit is used by the opposition, whether it is Akhilesh Yadav himself, who seems to be now not making this a top priority, or Tejasvi Yadav in Bihar, or the Congress or whatever. Ms. Mamta Banerjee, the Trinamool Congress raised the whole issue in effectively a month and a half back in Bengal. Bengal goes to election next year. But what is it that is stopping the opposition from, in a concerted manner, bringing their voters out on the streets? Is a question that bothers us, which is why we've taken this step.
Okay. And continuously, after the Lok Sabha results were announced, many people thought that the Modi government is not having the majority. They are not going to bring some draconian laws into the parliament. And when the Waqf bill was introduced, it was immediately sent to the JPC, and people rejoiced it as a victory that the bill, after so many years, is sent to the joint parliamentary committee, and every parliamentary party is going to have a say on that bill. But after seeing the conduct of the JPC, people are again hopeless that the last sort of relief that we had in the parliament is also gone. So JPC is also going to happen like this. We don't have any democratic way to protest inside the parliament. How do you see this?
History will tell us it is not either a black and white scenario, okay, first of all. So I, for one, feel it's very important that post June 2024, we see certain, though I must say one thing since you've given me this opportunity, that the manner in which the speaker in the Lok Sabha particularly, and even in the Rajya Sabha, Vice President who chairs the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, the manner in which they conduct themselves in an overtly partisan way. And not just partisan, I mean, it's an extremely unparliamentary way that they are conducting themselves. We are watching, the nation is watching, the country is watching, the language used, the gestures used towards the opposition are extremely, extremely unparliamentary. So I'd like to start by saying that. And that actually exposes this government and this regime for what it is. It does not even have the decency to function with a sense of decency in parliament, It is extremely aggressive, extremely brazen. And I want to start by saying that. Having said that, post-June 2024, I think there is a marked difference in the kind of speeches you see because the opposition is getting its act together, it's speaking with all the malfunctioning by the speaker and the chair in a partisan way. Things are coming on record, etc. So one cannot be cynical and say it's as bad as before. However, I would like to caution the opposition as a seasoned activist of many, many years standing, that to just believe that a proto-fascist majoritarian regime, which has got two allies who are cynically on its side calling themselves secular, that is Nitish Kumar ji and Chandrababu Naidu ji, will sit tight on its agenda while you are not able to pull together your strengths after this 240 victory. This is the lesson I think the Waqf Act being passed should tell us, that the opposition was taking it too lightly, was believed that, the battle is already won when it is far from won. And one of the things I've been saying, and which is why some of us are not very popular with the opposition either, is that since 2016, I've been saying that after the street opposition to the land acquisition bill, I still remember that when the parliament tried to pass the land acquisition bill in 2014, all the opposition marched on Sansad Marg right up to parliament. And that created a huge impact. And then the government had to withdraw the bill. And then, of course, the BJP states passed the laws to countermand the land acquisition law, which was passed in 2013 by the UPA 2 regime. However, after that one act on the streets, the parliament left it to students of JNU, Hyderabad Central University, FTII, Pondicherry, to take lathis of this government, to go get jailed. Anti-CA activists, I mean, one issue I'd like to flag in there, because you're so politically sensitive, is, there are 12 activists still, young activists, all Muslim, who were very active during the anti-CA, anti-NRC agitation, who are still in jail. Only 6 are out on bail. We know the name of Umar Khalid. We know the name of Gulfish Shah Fatima to some extent. We know the name of Miran Haider, but there's also Shifaul Rahman. There are 12 young leaders whose lives we have ruined, and this regime has ruined. And what is the political opposition doing to raise voices on the weaponization of the laws, the way laws are being used against civil society, the Kunal Kamra case, I mean, look at the Kunal Kamra case. There were things on Twitter, there were things on social media, but should not the political opposition be speaking much more sharply for free speech? So, this is something that has frustrated many of us. That while those who fight have fought on and who continue to fight, individuals, people's organizations, students, the youth has been amazing in this country. They've staked so much for democracy in this country, the younger leaders across universities, farmers, the secular Muslim activist leaders of the anti-CA, Shaheen Bagh kind of agitations all over have been just incredible. But what has the political opposition done to stand by their side or to pick up those issues? And that is an issue that I think we need to raise constructively. Hopefully, they have the maturity to take this as constructive criticism, because we are seeing this kind of authoritarian regimes all over the world where there's a disillusionment with the major opposition party. You know that, I know that. So I think the opposition must have the space and time to listen to activists and journalists like you who raise certain issues.
And regarding the opposition part, Tamil Nadu government had announced that they are going to challenge the Waqf bill in the Supreme Court, and they have filed a petition in the Supreme Court. I think DMK MP Wilson is going to argue in that case, that we get to know. But putting up a case in the parliament against the Waqf bill, how do you see that, ma'am?
I still remember, okay, August 5, 2019, when Article 370 was abrogated, and there was a sense of complete despair. Even then, the then Chief Minister, Mr. M.K. Stalin, had raised the issue of how wrong and unconstitutional it was, and what an attack on federalism that entire move of the central government was, of the union government was. And it's extremely welcome, this move by the DMK party to move a reasoned opposition to the Waqf bill. And the Supreme Court has stated that it will start hearing the matters on April 16th. And we hope that the hearings go well and the judgment comes quickly. We also hope, I take this opportunity, that the Supreme Court quickly lists. There are over 120 challenges to the Citizenship Amendment Bill of 2019 and the National Register of Citizens. And we hope that that case is also heard very, very quickly.
And let's see what unfolds, ma'am. Thank you for taking this time to talk to our audience, ma'am. We will meet
Thank
again.
you so much
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.